Chapter 1. Main features of the medieval period. Terms to learn. Chronicle. Short historical narrative and date-wise account. Manuscripts. Handwritten documents. Archives. Places where documents and manuscripts are stored. Biography. Written life history of a person. Habitat. Environment of a region and the social and economic lifestyle of its residents. The history of the world is divided into three broad periods: ancient, medieval, and modern. Each of these periods covers several centuries, and the length of a period may differ from one part of the world to another. In Europe, the medieval period started around the 5th century AD, while in India it started around the 8th century AD. The period from 8th century AD up to 18th century AD is considered as the medieval period in India. 8th century is regarded as the end of the ancient period and the beginning of medieval period in India, and 18th century is regarded as the end of medieval period and the beginning of the modern period of India. The medieval period in India can be broadly divided into two phases: the early medieval period, 8th to 18th century, and the later medieval period, 13th to 18th century. During the early medieval period, various regional kingdoms arose in the north as well as South India. The history of earlier medieval period is centered on power struggles among these regional kingdoms and the frequent rise and fall of these kingdoms. In the later medieval period, there were a number of Muslim invasions from Central Asia. These invaders were mainly Turks, Afghans, and Mughals. They influenced the Indian culture, and a unique Indo-Islamic culture developed in India. Towards the end of 15th century, European traders began direct overseas trade with India. The first European trader to arrive in India were the Portuguese. Later on, English, the Dutch, and the French traders arrived in India. By the mid-17th century, the French and English became the two trading rivals in India. Gradually, the English outstripped the French in this rivalry, and by the mid-18th century, the English gained political power in India, and this was the beginning of the modern period in India. Sources of the medieval history. Historians use different types of sources to learn about the past, depending upon the period of their study and the nature of their investigation. Some of the sources of studying ancient history, such as the coins, inscriptions, architecture, and literary records, were also used to study the history of medieval period. However, the number of literacy work increased dramatically during this period. These sources can be broadly divided into two groups: archaeological sources and literary sources. Archaeological sources. These sources included inscriptions, monuments, and coins. Inscriptions. Inscriptions are found on copper plates, rocks, and pillars. The inscriptions are also found in the temples. These inscriptions throw light on religious belief, social customs, and the extent of empire under different rules. Monuments. Monuments such as palaces, forts, victory pillars, temples, and mosques throw light on the art, architecture, social, religious, and cultural life of this period. Coins. The coins made up of gold, silver, and copper etc. provide the historians various information regarding the names of various rulers, period of their rule, and the economic condition under various rulers. The other archaeological sources include the weapons and war equipments such as swords, daggers, shields, spears, artillery and armor, ornaments, tools, utensils, clothes, and other items of daily use. Paintings. The paintings such as Rajasthani, Mughal, and Deccan paintings depict the religious, social, and cultural life of this period. Literary sources. In this period, paper became cheaper and easily available. People used to write holy texts, chronicles of rulers, letters, and teaching of saints, petitions, and judicial records, and for registers of accounts and taxes. Manuscripts were collected by wealthy people, rulers, monasteries, and temples. They were placed in libraries and archives. These manuscripts and documents provide a lot of detailed information to historians, but they are also difficult to use. There was no printing press in those days, so scribes copied manuscripts by hand. As scribes copied manuscripts, they also introduced some changes. These small changes grew over centuries of copying until manuscripts of the same text became substantially different from one another. This is a serious problem because we rarely find the original manuscripts of the author today. As a result, historians have to read different manuscripts versions of the same text to guess what the author had originally written. Some of the important literary works of this period are those of the authors like Abul Fazl, Firdausi, and Amir Khushro, biographies of rulers like Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, and writing of foreign travelers like Ali Masudi, Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta, Marco Polo, Niccolo Conti, and Francois Berniers, etc. New and old terminologies. Historians today have to be careful about the terms they use because they have meant different things in the past. For example, take the term Hindustan. Today we understand it as India, the modern nation state. When the term was used in the 13th century by Minhaj-e-Siraj, a chronicler who wrote in Persian, he meant the areas of Punjab, Haryana, and the lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. In the political sense, he used the term for lands that were a part of the domination of Delhi Sultan. The areas included in this term shifted with the extent of the Sultanate, but the term never included South India. By contrast, in the early 16th century, Babur used Hindustan to describe the geography, the fauna, and the culture of inhabitants of the subcontinent. However, this was somewhat similar to the way as Amir Khushro, the 14th century poet, used the word Hind. While the idea of geographical and a cultural entity like India did exist, the term Hindustan did not carry the political and national meanings which we associate it with today. New social and political groups. The study of medieval period is a huge challenge to historians largely because of the various developments that occurred during this period. Various technological developments such as the introduction of Persian wheel in irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, and firearms in combat made their appearance. New foods and beverages arrived in the subcontinent: potatoes, corn, chilies, tea, and coffee. This was also a period of great mobility. Groups of people traveled long distances in search of opportunity. The subcontinent had immense wealth and the possibilities of people to make a fortune. One group of people who became important in this period were the Rajputs, a name derived from Rajputana, the son of a ruler. The term included not just rulers and chieftains but also soldiers and commanders who served in the armies of different monarchs. Other group of people such as the Marathas, Sikhs, Jats, Ahoms, and Khyastas, a caste of scribes and secretaries, also became politically important. Throughout this period, there was a gradual clearing of forest and the extension of agriculture. Changes in this habitat forced many forest dwellers to migrate. Others started tilling the land and became peasants. These new peasant groups gradually began to be influenced by regional markets, chieftains, priests, monasteries, and temples. They were required to pay taxes and offer goods and services to local lords. As a result, significant economic and social differences emerged among the peasants. Some possessed more productive land, others also kept cattle, and some combined artisanal work with agricultural activity during the lean season. As society became more differentiated, people were grouped into jatis or subcaste. Jatis framed their own rules and regulations to manage the conduct of their members. These regulations were enforced by an assembly of elders called the Jati Panchayat. Several villages were governed by a chieftain. Together, they were only one small unit of a state. Large states like those of Cholas, Tugluks, or Mughals encompassed many regions. By 700 AD, many regions already possessed distinct geographical dimensions and their own language and cultural characteristics. They were also associated with specific ruling dynasties. New developments in religious traditions. The medieval period witnessed major development in religious traditions. It was during this period that important changes occurred in what we call Hinduism today. These included the worship of new deities, the construction of temple by royalty, and the growing importance of Brahmins the priest as dominant group of society. One of the major development of this period was the emergence of the idea of bhakti, of a loving personal deity that devotees could reach without the aid of priests or elaborate rituals. This was also the period when new religions appeared in the subcontinent. Merchants and migrants first brought the teaching of the Holy Quran to India in the 17th century. Like Hinduism, Islam was interrupted in a variety of ways by its followers. There were the Shia Muslims who believed that the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law Ali was the legitimate leader of the Muslim community, and the Sunni Muslims who accepted the authority of the earlier leaders, Khalifas of the community and the succeeding Khalifas. During the medieval period, the economies of several regions reached a level of prosperity that attracted the interest of European trading companies. Lesson at a glance. In India, the medieval period lasted roughly from the 8th century to the 18th century. During the early medieval period, various regional kingdoms arose in the north as well as South India. In the later medieval period, Turks, Afghans, and the Mughals from Central Asia conquered large parts of India. Towards the end of the 15th century, European traders began direct overseas trade with India. Around the mid 18th century, the British gained political power in India. Archaeological sources for studying the history of medieval period include inscriptions, monuments, coins, weapons, ornaments, tools, utensils and clothes, etc. Literary sources include the works of scholars, biographies, foreign travelers, accounts and official documents. There was no printing press those days, so scribes copied manuscripts. They made some changes in the manuscripts while copying, so historians find it difficult to find the original text of the manuscript written by the author. In the 13th century, the word Hindustan was not used in the sense as we use it today for the whole nation. It was generally used for the regions under the Delhi Sultan. In any case, South India was not included in it. The society was divided into various jatis, subcastes, and jatis framed their own rules. Several villages were governed by the chieftains. Together they were only one small unit of a state. Large states encompassed many regions. The importance of Brahmins and priests grew in this period, and a new religion, Islam, appeared in the subcontinent.